Back.
Yeah, mic check, mic check, mic check. What's going on, man? We are officially live again. Welcome to Kicking is the Real Podcast. Kicking the Real Podcast. I didn't even say the name of my own podcast right off the rip. Welcome, though. Welcome, Kicking the Real. I'm your host, Andy Diosa. If you're a first time listener, thank you for being here. If you're a multiple time listener, thank you for being here. As always, excited for the episode. I told you the guest list is going to keep rolling. We're going to have illustrious guests on this show. So today I'm excited to have my guy, Alex Ruiz, in the building, journalist covering the LA Galaxy here in LA. And there's just no better time than this one to have Alex in the building. So, Alex, thanks for coming through to kick with me, man. How you feeling?
Good, man. I mean, LA Galaxy Land right now is doing really good. Feels like the end of Star Wars, right? Where everyone's just dancing, right? You got the Force Ghosts of Chris Klein out there. All the people there that added the struggles, but they made it so much worth it at the end. I think everybody right now in LA Galaxy Land's enjoying themselves, and just what a great game, what a great day, what a game in general. Just overall, really excited to talk to you, Andy.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to have you on. As we were saying, I kind of lined these guests up, and when I made the podcast, I initially knew a guest list of people that I wanted on, and certain things just start falling into place perfectly. And like I mentioned, there was no better time than this one to have Alex on. So we'll start how we do every show. Start with the origin story, just so the people listening to get a little bit of background. So I just wanted to know what was behind the start for you to get into sports writing, to get into the field, and initially lead to what you're doing now, covering the LA Galaxy.
Yeah, I think the one thing for me growing up is I've loved all sports. I've been like a guy who, loves hearing stories about athletes, about coaches, just being able to kind of get more in depth with the game. I think, definitely soccer, MLS compared to other leagues like, the NFL, NBA, MLB, right? Don't necessarily get the kind of coverage that those other leagues get, right? Obviously, this sport in this country isn't at that level yet. And when it comes to popularity, it's going to get there soon. All the metrics say, a lot of young people loving soccer. It's one of the most highest growing sports in this country. So when I wanted to get into sports journalism, I really wanted to get into the NFL, and that's the one thing I really loved growing up. I was a bit of a nerd when it came to all the X's and O's and that, but soccer always had my heart. So I started diving into more soccer stories. I felt like if I could create a path for myself, I could be somebody in this in this industry, in the sports soccer media landscape of the U.S. And obviously covering the LA Galaxy growing up, watching the team, kind of knowing a good amount on my own. It was a no-brainer for me to kind of start covering the LA Galaxy. And I think it just started with, just being able to be out there, not be afraid to, put boundaries on myself, not be afraid to, take that leap. Was I scared that nobody was going to read anything that I wrote, or that it might be a waste of time? Of course, yeah. But in the end, I feel like it was a good thing that people kind of connected with what I wrote, kind of were able to, enjoy it just as much as I did when it comes to writing and talking to people and putting a lot of these stories out. So yeah, that's kind of why I kind of dove into doing soccer. And just as, people started to pay attention and kind of read my stuff, I kind of started to get into the groove of it, sort of build that confidence, and, keep continuing that for now, I think 3-4 years now, which is crazy just saying that out loud. But yeah, it's been amazing. And, if I can just be somebody in this, soccer media landscape, I'll be a very happy man.
I love it, man. It's a great mentality. One thing that I've always appreciated and admired about Alex as a younger writer is that attention to detail and that attention to kind of getting past just the simple stuff and breaking things down and looking at things from a different perspective. I'm not a stats guy at all, but I do appreciate when people are digging into the stats and making stories and just giving tactical breakdowns about that stuff. It's really cool, and I think it's really beneficial for the soccer landscape in general. We know, especially being in this MLS circle, that it's very close and there's eyes everywhere from people everywhere, and all of that stuff kind of goes in a circle. So it's good to have that information out there. Let's talk about your Substack, the Galactic Tribune. Just starting that, and then what kind of work you do there, so that people could get familiar with that.
Yeah, so my Substack, the Galactic Tribune, is something that I kind of started off maybe a year and a half ago now. Basically, it's just my hub for all my LA Galaxy stories, whether it comes to, obviously feature stories, a lot of tactical breakdowns, which is what I tend to do. Just covering games, game recaps, game previews, just everything LA Galaxy related. It's on there. It's a lot of fun. I really love kind of being able to kind of put my own twist on stories and kind of being able to, analyze the game in a different way. So if you're really into that, if you really want to, get into the know with the LA Galaxy, be locked in with the LA Galaxy, I definitely recommend subscribing.
Definitely, man. Support Alex, somebody that's around the team as much as anybody else. He's always present, always in the mix, and always just knowing what's going on. Great information across the board, and which is why it's a perfect segue. Like I mentioned, perfect timing to have him on the show because we experienced another version of El Tráfico Saturday in Southern California. It's a game that never lets people down, and it's so funny going into it. We're always like, "Yeah, El Tráfico." Yesterday, it felt a little weird to me. Like walking into the stadium, I was almost like, it doesn't necessarily feel like one of those games. And I don't know if it was just the space that I was in, but like I've walked into certain Tráficos and I'm like, man, this feels like it's gonna be one of those. And then like instantly, as soon as the game starts, all of that like that doubt like leaves your mind, especially the way it started. It got up to such a fast start. The energy at Dignity Health Sports Park was amazing, and it's just I don't know. It's hard to describe with words exactly how crazy those games have been. Alex has been at many of them. I have been at many of them throughout the years. It's something incredible. So just let's start there. Let's just start with the energy atmosphere around the game without really talking result, without really talking what it stood for. What were your feelings going into the game? Because we'll break the game down and there's so much to talk about. But I just wanted to know, like, before the game actually started, how did you feel for it?
Yeah, obviously going in, this was the game of the season right here, right? It was going to determine if the LA Galaxy had the number one seed, if they had control of that for the rest of the year. And that's so important because obviously after this game, the Galaxy are still undefeated at Dignity Health Sports Park this entire year. And that is so, so key to Greg Vanney's team. They just seem to have, that hold onto home turf where, they're never, they're gonna be on the floor, they're gonna get tripped up, but they always find a way to fight back. They always find a way to get back up, And I think, Greg Vanney kind of talked about that, saying the team got punched in the mouth, right? A couple of times, said that multiple times. But they still found a way to get up. And that's so important for me. And which is why I was really paying attention to this game. Because look, if the Galaxy want to have a solid playoff run, and I feel like a lot of people think that the LA Galaxy and LAFC are going to meet again once in the playoffs. Those two playoff games that those two clubs have all been at LAFC Stadium. If you can have one game at Dignity Health Sports Park in the playoffs, that could potentially be the game that gets you to MLS Cup final. You will take that. You need that, and the Galaxy haven't had that in the past playoff games. And I think coming into this game, they were locked in. Riqui Puig was locked in for sure, headed in there, and I think Ruiz and Jovic coming back into starting lineups, that was key. So being able to kind of put out your best possible lineup, obviously without Joseph Paintsell because he was out due to yellow card accumulation, but still being able to put up such a good lineup, have the combination of the fans and the atmosphere. Everybody knew the stakes from, the players, the coaching staff, people in the stands. Everybody knew that this was important. And I think that you felt that heading into the game, the hours into the game, there was a little bit of anxiousness of like, hey, this game here there's a lot on the line. Sure, it's a regular season game in September, but down the line, this could be the difference between an MLS Cup appearance for either club.
Absolutely. And the one thing I do love about Greg Vanney, well, one of the many things that I appreciate about Greg Vanney as a head coach is that he's not afraid to say certain things like that. And he said it leading up to the game. Like, this game, we need to have it if we want to win the West. And to me, that's just setting the bar right there. That's making sure that your players know how important it is. Unlike on the other side, where Steve Cherundolo always likes to kind of try to take the emotion out of moments and say it's not as important. Vanney's like, nah, this is what we need to do. We need to win these. We need to win this game, get the 3 points if we want to win the West. Because everything you mentioned, this could be the difference between going up the road and playing a playoff game at BMO Stadium or hosting one at home. And that's a big deal. The game ended 4-2, Galaxy win. It was a whirlwind. It was 2-0 at halftime. A crazy start from LAFC. 4 minutes in, Mateus Bogus gets the first goal, and then Denny Bouanga gets the second one at the 15-minute mark. Unfortunate for Jalen Neal on those plays because he got left on an island with Bouanga, but as a young defender, that's just tough luck because many defenders in MLS have been in the same position across the board and have not been successful defending Denny Bouanga. But that was probably a lot to do as well with what was going on in the midfield and careless giveaways and sloppy mistakes. So let's analyze that first half first, and then we'll get to the second half and everything that transpired there. But what sentiments do you have after that first half? Because the way I saw it, this was probably the most defeated I had seen the Galaxy, and maybe not just in terms of the play, but in the body language and the anger across the board. Like, that they're emotionally up for these games because they're rivalry games and because this one was so important at the top of the standings. But I just saw players that weren't on the same mindset. They were kind of arguing with each other, kind of being a little upset at each other, and that showed in the play, that showed in those first 45 minutes. So how did you perceive those?
The first goal, Obviously, a bit of an error there, kind of all over the place goal. Kind of sucks to concede those very cheap goals. Then obviously Bouanga kind of taking advantage of Jalen Neal in the first half, getting put in the alley. I mean, that's a recipe to get cooked, no matter who you are in this league. But yeah, I think for sure, one of the plays I remember in the first half was my Yoshida giveaway that leads to Giroud having a shot that almost becomes a goal right there. And that right there was the entire LA Galaxy summed up in those first 25 minutes where they had kind of lost their composure. You know, they're a very emotional team. Guys on this club like Joseph Paintsell, Riqui Puig, you know, Gabriel Peck, they're very emotional players. And that, you know, those being your star players, that also kind of bleeds into everybody else. And we saw kind of Surreal kind of take a lot of criticism for that first half, right? Very cheap giveaways. The giveaway that led to the first goal. And I thought overall, just the structure was getting broken because that's the one thing Greg Vanning kind of talks about is having a structure, having guys that are, you know, going to be able to kind of not give the ball away in these bad areas. And we saw that during those first 20 minutes. I think right now the first half of the Galaxy was just like, hey, how can we get into this half? You know, let's create some danger. Let's kind of not keep shooting ourselves in the foot. And, you know, we kind of saw that as the first half went on. You know, there was a couple of chances here and there, some good buildups from the LA Galaxy, just kind of weren't as dangerous in the final third. But I think for sure the LA Galaxy kind of grew into that half. I think, you know, obviously, like I said, very emotional team. So the emotions kind of got the better of them for sure in that first half. I think, you know, the atmosphere of the stadium, kind of having both sets of fans, you know, kind of creating that buzz, creating, you know, this excitement. And then obviously, you know, when they go down a goal, the Galaxy can very much be emotional, can very much allow that moment to kind of take over. But I think it was a good thing kind of see this team kind of not go down 3-0. I think 3-0 is almost an impossible task. Obviously, we saw it in the first El Tráfico, but I mean, given the scenarios, given the, you know, players LAFC had at their disposal, it would have been so hard. But yeah, I think it was a really good thing that Greg Vandy's team were able to kind of keep it together towards the end. Like I said, very emotional team. So I wasn't really surprised to kind of see them go down 2-0 early. It's kind of something they tend to do whenever it gets bad. It goes to worse. But yeah, they very much lost their composure, and that's why LFC got off to their good start.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at the opposing side, you say, you know, if you're playing a rivalry game, the one thing you can't do is concede early, and then that's obviously what happened. So it makes things difficult. And like you mentioned, LAFC fans, they're definitely pressure a bit too, but the atmosphere in the stadium is it kind of goes from that energy that you have before the game, and you're like, all right, we're so excited to now we can see 2 early goals in 15 minutes, and the fans are kind of taken out of it. And Greg Vandy spoke about that after the game as well. Like you have to do your job and keep the fans engaged as well, besides just, you know, playing a good game on the field. So that is it's like you said, it's not too surprising to see that happen to this Galaxy team. But what transpired in that second half was incredible, and the team came back out, and you could tell they weren't completely done. And I think on the other side, LAFC kind of entered with a little bit of confidence and was kind of like, yeah, we're probably good. And I was saying this in the press box, you know, the first goal that gets scored by the Galaxy, the Dejan Joveljic goal, which was an amazing goal. I mean, just a beautiful play.
First start since he returned from injury too.
First start from injury, correct. And when that goal went in, I was like, this game, that was the goal that it's like, all right, this game, Galaxy are probably going to win this game, because it was like the blow that let LAFC was like, oh man, here we go with this again. And this is dating back to the beginning of the rivalry when Zlatan was around, where LAFC always struggled in that building and they couldn't win for such a long time in Carson. But that first goal to me was automatically like, this is about to get crazy, because it was so early in the second half as well when Dejan scored. So the difference in those two halves, I want to know, what do you think it was? Number one, the Galaxy went on and scored 4 unanswered goals. Joe Willis gets a brace. One is a nice little back heel off of kind of like a crazy play. Edwin Cerrillo, who I want to get your opinion on this as well, scored, I think, a top 3 Tráfico goal ever. And I want to make sure I mention, I mean, in quality, not in circumstances, not in what the goal meant to the rivalry or to the stakes. I just think in all terms of quality, I think it's a top 3 Tráfico goal. So we could discuss that. But for me, I want to know what, like I said, what you think changed in that second half for the Galaxy, because a Joe Willis brace, that Cedillo banger, and then Riqui Puig gets his consolation prize and scores a nice goal as well at the end there to make it 4-2.
Yeah, for sure. I think the one thing when it comes to kind of what the Galaxy did is one of their strengths is being a possession team, right? Kind of being able to hold on to the ball. We know LAFC, they're going to bunker down. They're going to allow the LA Galaxy to have a bunch of possession. They're totally fine with that. It's been like that ever since Steve Cherundolo took the reins of LAFC. But the one thing the Galaxy kind of really improved on, and the one thing I really hope this team starts to do more when it comes to kind of playing these teams that tend to sit back is just their combination play. It just was on full display. And the quality of Marco Reus really showed this night, because the one thing the Galaxy kind of tend to do is get, I don't know how to describe it, not like boring possession, but they aren't able to penetrate through the middle. They very much tend to kind of flip the ball out wide, try to move numbers, try to move defenders like that. It can work, but I think LAFC, they are very well trained. They know that's what the Galaxy are going to do. With the addition of Marco Reus, aside from Riqui Puig, you now have another player who's able to play in the tight spaces, play that small ball, able to combine well with his teammates, have very good anticipation offensively. And I think that's really what led to the LA Galaxy being able to break down LAFC throughout the second half. And a lot of these goals, except maybe the Surreal one, it's combination play that allows the Galaxy to advance from the middle third to the final third to then the goal, right? For Jovelic's goal, it's, him combining with Puig and then Peck, and then those guys kind of moving defenders around. And then it's the individual brilliance right there of Jovic on that first goal, right? To kind of make Eddie Segura slide one way, feints out, and then gets a good look past Hugo Lloris. And then now we'll talk about the Surreal goal. I agree with you, Andy. I think in quality, in technique, put circumstance aside, I think this is, and I mean, I guess we can kind of put it, you have a World Cup winning goalkeeper on the net. Like the fact that you're able to kind of hit it, with the side of your foot, just give it that spin, that curl, that's so difficult to kind of control and maneuver, and then just have it hit the top corner is absolutely sensational. I don't think there's a goal kind of like that I'm in awe of when it comes to the technique of it, because wow, it was spectacular. It's always those long shots that, tend to get the motion of the crowd going. And I think that shot there kind of put a new rush of adrenaline for the LA Galaxy, a new rush of concentration, and a new belief that, hey, they can win it. I think for sure this is maybe the top 3 goal in the rivalry. For me, when it comes to all time, I think the best goal in this rivalry was the Brian Rodriguez one a couple years ago, where he kind of went through 3-4 defenders. When it comes to quality, I think that one's going to be hard to top. But yeah, this one's definitely 2 or 3 on my list.
Yeah, shout out to that Brian Rodriguez goal. I was talking to our buddy Justin after the game yesterday. I had completely forgotten about that goal. And it's because these teams play so much and there's so many goals every time they play. And I was like, wow, yeah, you're right. That I was there at that game as well, and it was an incredible goal. Hard to forget about. I remember Greg Vanny said after the game, we'll be seeing that goal on highlight reels for 20 years. And he was very upset that B-Rod kind of carved them up like traffic cones. And then obviously the Zlatan goal is just one that stands out as well. But yeah, this Surreal goal was incredible. And like you mentioned, it gave him a new spark. It gave him a new, because at that point, that's the equalizer. And you're like, all right, well, this is wide open with the whole half hour to play, which is the recipe for El Tráfico usually. Like whatever result you see in the beginning is probably going to change. And it's like game on once again. Here we go. And that was the moment that Vinny alluded to. The energy got back into the stadium. The crowd's back in it. And now you're playing with the swag that you kind of intended to start the game with, right? And now you're seeing an LAFC team that's like, all right, now we're kind of in our lower block, and this is kind of what we want to do, but we're not sure it's working out. And that's been, I guess, the recipe for disaster for LAFC this year. The few games that they have lost is, all right, now when somebody kind of breaks that mentality for us, how do we adjust? And we haven't been able to see that from Steve Cherundolo and his team in these bigger games against Columbus, now this game against LA Galaxy. And then the Jovic brace, he gets a second goal. Ricky gets his goal there at the end. In terms of the comeback, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit already as well, how important is that for the Galaxy? Because this is a team you want mentality, you want that growth to show, right? And like the same way we mentioned, Jalen Neal had a rough first half with Denny Bouanga kind of just going right past him. You have to give him credit for having a good second half and being able to step back up to Denny Bouanga without any fear. And even in that moment that they kind of collided, just be like, yo, I'm not scared of this moment. Like, you like to see these things from these players, especially somebody that age. So how important was that comeback in terms of just mentality and the LA Galaxy showing heart?
Yeah, it was huge, especially considering the LAFC had kind of gone the entire season kind of bossing around the LA Galaxy. The LA Galaxy needed this win so much to just kind of have that, that idea that, we can't beat LAFC, kind of make that disappear, especially heading into the final stretch, heading into the playoffs. It was massively important, and especially kind of doing it on your home turf. It kind of just amplifies the importance of, hey, we now control our own destiny when it comes to getting home field advantage in the Western Conference. And that's going to be so big if the Galaxy are going to make it to MLS Cup, if, they're able to kind of keep this core together, kind of keep everybody healthy. I mean, I think right now they're genuine favorites to be able to make it. And like you said, Andy, just the maturity of a lot of these players. Edwin Cerrillo, I thought he kind of had a rough first half, right? Wasn't necessarily great, kind of at fault a bit on some of the goals. But look, he was able to kind of lock in, kind of able to obviously have his moment of brilliance. And, he kind of got emotional in the press conference, kind of talking about, his role with the team, that, he's a guy who'll do the dirty work. He knows he won't get much of the recognition, but he's okay with it. He just wants to be able to kind of help the team as much as he can. And he very much did in that second half. I thought he was really good when it comes to kind of keeping the ball a little bit better, kind of covering some spaces, not allowing LAFC to kind of be on the counter all the time. And Jalen Neal, I mean, what a game, I thought. Very rough half in the first half. Whenever you're put on an island against Danny Bouanga, it's never going to go good for you. But the fact that he wasn't scared in the second half, the fact that, he learned from what went wrong in the first half to correct it, to be physical with Bouanga. I remember a couple of weeks ago, we were talking to Maya Yoshida in press conference, and he mentioned that he thinks Jalen Neal's a little too nice, right? And against LAFC in that second half, he definitely wasn't too nice. He wasn't afraid to get in the face of Bouanga. He wasn't afraid to kind of, go up against a guy who's, an MVP candidate for this year, and kind of shut him down that second half. And I thought, that's a real, if you could put the LA Galaxy season in one player, in one performance, I thought it was Jalen Neal, because the fact that he was kind of able to just take that next step when many thought he wasn't going to be able to in that game, kind of shows the LA Galaxy. I think a lot of people who cover the team, we were like, yeah, this team's good, but are they really great? Are they really, going to take that next step? LA Galaxy right now are writing their own story. They're kind of showing everybody who kind of doubted them at the beginning of the year that, hey, look, we're for real right now. Obviously, a lot of recency bias, but, you can't ignore what the LA Galaxy are doing right now. And I think seeing that maturity across the 11, across the bench, across the entire organization, it's just great to see for the club. And I think it's going to be a huge momentum booster for them in these final 5 games and plus playoffs.
No, it's a great shout, especially on Jalen Neal, because having somebody like Maya Yoshida on your side, who is a veteran who's played World Cups and kind of has that experience to be able to show you and tell you and kind of help mold you and to be a center back, a defender that has longevity in football. It's great to see him say that, and then also him give Jalen his props and him give him that confidence, even in a game like El Tráfico, where he has a rough first half. And he said it himself, like, I talked to Jalen, you bounce back from it, and then you have a better second half. And to Edwin Cerrillo's point, I think he's been amazing this year for the Galaxy. And he mentioned one really important thing: the work that he does usually goes under the radar, and that's the position that he plays. But it's certainly something that people that are very tapped into the team and that watch the team and that follow the team know, like, he's been a crucial part of what they're able to do. So he's rewarded with that beautiful goal that's gonna live up there in El Tráfico lore, his first MLS goal. It's so funny that he also, after the game, said, I hit it, I scored it, and I didn't know what to do after that. You see his reaction was a little bit like whatever, but it was
Those are always the best celebrations, when the guy doesn't know what to do.
Absolutely. I don't think he was prepared for that. But somebody who was prepared to celebrate, of course, is Riqui Puig. He's always quite the showsman. He likes to be out there and putting on a show for everybody, and he just deservedly so. He's a great player, and I think the Payaso thing with Chiellini in the U.S. Open Cup between them kind of just added to a little bit of this rivalry, and it's kind of what the rivalry needed, in my opinion. I love the Zlatan versus Vela early days. Like, it was amazing to cover. It was amazing to be around. But the one thing I love about this now is that you had a game that had Olivier Giroud and Marco Reus on the field, and we're talking about Edwin Cerrillo, we're talking about Jalen Neal, we're talking about different players that are not necessarily these super huge stars that obviously MLS wants to promote and get eyes on, but these are players that are having a big impact, and Riqui is a part of that, because Riqui at the first Rose Bowl had an incredible game last year and was just it was probably one of the best games I've seen him play with the Galaxy, just doing everything that he wanted and really stepping up to that moment. But then this season, we've seen him not be effective against LAFC, and we've seen him kind of, I don't want to say disappear, but just not be part of the finishing product that they need in the final third. So let's get into this here. Alex, like I mentioned, likes to have a good tactical breakdown, a look at how things are flowing with the Galaxy. So I'm going to put this on the screen right here. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it. If you're listening, I'll read it out to you. Riqui Puig has created 0 chances in his last 3 games against LAFC. The black and gold has been able to make him a non-factor in the final third. Puig has a talent and team to bounce back this weekend. This is the biggest game of the year for Puig. I think that is a very normal take. It's a very level take. And I love the fact that stat actually got traction, because I saw on the MLS Countdown show, like, people were talking about it because, like, wow, A, the stat is crazy, but B, it is true. And in your biggest games, you want to see these players show up, and you want to see these players not only show up, be a reason why you're either going to score goals, not be the reason why you're going to lose the game, right? So we thought that was fine. We thought nobody thinks anything of it, but Riqui, being Riqui, who is I'm going to call him Twitter fingers from here on out, who has I guess a fun time hopping on social media, whether it's him, whether it's somebody controlling his social media. Instantly after the game, responded to Alex's tweet. If you're watching on YouTube, you see it here with the laughing emoji and with the finger over the mouth emoji, which is hilarious because, like I mentioned, Ricky's been doing this all year. Him and Sasha Kleshton had their little back and forth. I actually asked Riqui about it earlier in the season if he was having fun on social media, and he laughed.
You got to ask him again now.
Yeah, so I have to correct. So it's just funny because that, of course, gets all the attention in the world, and everybody's laughing. Riqui, he has a great game, goal, assist, whatever. But I'm going to give Alex the credit for motivating Riqui Puig to be super tapped in this game, because we saw, kind of like we mentioned with Jalen and Edwin, the first half wasn't that great for him. There were some giveaways, some sloppy play in the final third. The second half, it was the Riqui that we have all grown accustomed to see. So I'm going to give you the floor for your Riqui Puig breakdown here on Twitter, and how that kind of transpired, and how do you feel about that?
I mean, look, I don't mind Riqui Puig quote tweeting me or anything like that. It's totally fine. I know how he feels about me. He's told me how he feels about me, so it's all good. Honestly, that with the laughing emojis and the shush emoji is better than the big nose emoji that he used. I think a couple weeks ago on me. So I'll take that. But yeah, look, Riqui Puig, you're the face of the franchise. You're going to be the guy that is going to get all the praise or get all the blame, no matter the results. Especially when it comes to El Tráfico. I mean, the last 3 games. Kind of like you mentioned, Andy, right? He's kind of been there, but he's just not been the guy impacting, creating goals, kind of having these moments. And look, I've kind of said this for a while. A motivated Riqui Puig, a guy who's able to kind of create a villain out of somebody, like he's unstoppable. He's like another tier of MLS player, right? You mentioned about Chiellini and the Payaso, right? That whole incident. Next game's the Rose Bowl match, and he balls out, has one of his best LA Galaxy performances, steals the show, scores a goal. I guess I'm his Giorgio Chiellini now. I don't know. That's cool, I guess. But yeah, he definitely for sure had that tweet in his bookmarks, had it ready in his drafts to kind of post out there, with his performance. Obviously, like you mentioned, Andy, I kind of saw an MLS countdown. That was a stat that was talked about. I'm pretty sure he was very well aware about that. And look, I think they asked him a little bit about it in the presser. He had a little smirk about it. Was able to kind of respond and say like, look, he was able to kind of go out there, kind of show what he can do in these moments. He loves and lives for these moments. He's not afraid of the pressure, and that's the one thing he said ever since he arrived here in Los Angeles. I don't forget kind of that he welcomes the pressure of kind of being the guy for the club, being the face of the franchise, being the guy that the club vision's built around. And Riqui Puig showed it last night. Look, when you are able to have a Riqui Puig that's firing on all cylinders, that's motivated, that is scoring goals, creating chances, having these individual moments of brilliance, and also having these moments where he's balling with the team, because there's a lot of times where he can be isolated himself, kind of want to be in control of the narrative, kind of be playing this hero ball style a lot of us like to call. But yesterday he was very much a key part of the machine for the LA Galaxy, and that was great to see. As long as Riqui Puig is motivated, if I'm the one motivating him, cool. I've seen some LA Galaxy fans on Twitter kind of thanking me, I guess, for kind of putting that out there, which is pretty funny. But look, Riqui Puig, I'm okay being the villain. It's cool. We'll hash it out in person next time we see each other.
They should be thanking you for motivating him, and I love it because it's a bulletin board material, as they say. But that just means that you're doing good work, and that stuff is making the rounds. So keep it up for sure. I think I enjoy the fact that the players are. Listen, man, I've always said this about sports. As players and coaches are just too uptight. They're too, we don't see anything. They see and hear everything. It's impossible for you not to. They know what the narrative is. And especially if it's somebody that's been around the team, that's prominently still around the team, they're going to hear it. So it's I don't think it's anything malicious per se, but, Of course, it's something that it's funny to see, because if he would have had a bad game, that would have been swept under the rug until the next time, I guess, they played LAFC, and that would have. So.
Yeah, like you're saying, Andy, like, whenever like athletes or coaches say, well, we don't read what's in the papers, that's like total lies. You have your kids, you have your girlfriends, you have your family members sending you stuff. Like, look, they're in the know of what's being said about them. And I'm pretty sure Riqui Puig we've seen this over the last couple of years. He's a very active guy on Twitter. Very much keeps receipts. I forgot where it was earlier in this year, but I remember back when you can like look at people's likes on Twitter, right? He was like liking posts of people kind of saying, "Why are you guys talking about Riqui now?" So he very much, keeps receipts, kind of in the know of the narratives going on around him. So yeah, look, like I said, Riqui Puig, if I'm your villain, that's cool. I'm okay being Joker and you being Batman.
We love it. We'll see if he quote tweets his way all the way to an MLS Cup with the Galaxy. Let's go back to something that you mentioned earlier, which I feel like it's very, I don't even know if it's spoken enough about right now. It's the fact that the Galaxy are undefeated at Dignity Health Sports Park this season. And when you look at their home record, there's that one loss because that was the Rose Bowl game at 4th of July against LAFC. But they have not lost in that building in Carson. And as always, I say, something where home field advantage is a big deal when you have a fan base that's bought in. And I want to bring this together because we talked about why it's so important, right? The being able to play LAFC or any big team in the West at home. They're not too far away from locking up that one spot if things pan out in the home stretch, which we'll talk about. But to me, it's a testament of how far the Galaxy have come from last year. And I wanted to talk about that because Greg Vanney and Will Kuntz deserve a lot of credit. I mean, you and I were both around at the beginning of last season with the protests, with the boycotts, different things happening. And throughout the year, there was so much said about everything, right? And I think unfairly, there was a lot said about Greg Vanney. And we've talked about, sure, there's mishaps for every coaches and there's criticism to go around for everybody. But last year and the culmination of what happened to get to last year, a lot of that did not have to do with Greg Vanney. And Greg Vanney was trying to put out a lot of fires. And he mentioned it throughout the year, and you could see how defeated he was and saying a lot of these things are out of my control. But he was the one that constantly had to go in front of the media and answer questions that he probably didn't have answers to. So it's almost like a victory lap for Vanney, right? It's him showing now with different players and the style of player that he wants with Peck and Paints on the wings. And now you have Marco Ruiz in that mix. You see how important Cerrillo has become. Defensively, the Galaxy are still not the most solid, but they're also not a team that we talked about in the beginning of the year that they couldn't defend at all. Like they've gotten better in those ways as well. And then Will Kuntz going in, and I thought this was hilarious yesterday at halftime. Will Kuntz is walking one way in the press box. John Thornton is walking the other way. And then I see at the end of the game, Will Kuntz is on the field talking to, Steve Cherundolo and all the LAFC staffers. And it's probably such a great feeling for Will, right? He goes to rap across town. It's just all this is coming together. And you mentioned a lot of people may have had doubts about the Galaxy coming into the season. I don't know why, but I firmly believe that they were going to be a top 5 team in MLS this year. I don't know how I pulled that one out because all the other predictions I made were basically wrong, but I was very confident that the Galaxy were going to be a top 5 team this year. And they're showing that. Top of the West, the only team that has scored more goals than them in MLS this year is the Inter Miami, Lionel Messi and company. So just what is that culmination like where, sure, they're undefeated at home, but that's just such a larger story behind what Vanney and what Wilkins have been able to do.
Yeah, I think, look, the organization as a whole has just the atmosphere around there has improved so much compared to a year and a half ago, right? Where, it's so hard to get a hold of any of the people in the front office. It's so hard to kind of, get answers to questions that us as media kind of have towards the team. Now it feels, you see Will Kuntz every single game in the press box. He's right there. You see, Michael Stevens right there, assistant general manager. You see Tom Braun there, president of the club there. It's right now the atmosphere around the club in general is just really good. And I think that's had a trickle down effect to the coaching staff, to the technical staff, medical staff, to the players. Just heading into this year, it was in such a better mood. It was more concentrated on, hey, let's lock in, let's get better than, okay, forget about the protests, forget about what's going on with the president being suspended, forget about, a couple of our DPs being injured to start the year. It was just a clean slate for the LA Galaxy. And look, Greg Vanney's proved it for years now in MLS. Whenever he has the opportunity to kind of build his team to kind of be in control of kind of the players that come in, when he's able to implement his system, his teams are good. Go back to Toronto. You go back a couple of years ago with the LA Galaxy, right? 2022, where they were able to make the playoffs. Now 2024, where they have a competent front office. They have a great mind in Will Kuntz, who's running things, right? He's cooking in the kitchen, as they say in LA Galaxy land. But yeah, everything around the organization is just so much improved, and you're seeing the fruits of that this year, where we're seeing Will Kuntz make great signing after great signing. I feel like every one of the major acquisitions this year have had their impact on the club. You're seeing Greg Vanney kind of being able to grow players, right? We're talking about Jalen Neal. He's been able to take that next step under Greg Vanney. You look at players, Julian Alda, he was taking the next step before he got injured. Mauricio Cuevas, he's taking that next step. Edwin Cerrillo for sure has improved. since he first arrived here in Los Angeles. And I think everybody else around the club has, improved. So yeah, major props to Greg Vanney, major props to Will Kuntz. I think the one thing that I feel is under the radar for Greg Vanney, obviously a guy who's going to be contention for Coach of the Year, but man, his second half adjustments this season have been incredible. The fact that he's able to just kind of tactically change things to put the LA Galaxy, in position to, rescue a point, or in this case, come out with all 3 points. I mean, I hope that gets more media attention. I hope that's something that gets talked about a lot more, because right now, the Galaxy, they've had a lot of games like this where they go down or they're tied, have had frustrating first halves, but they're able to come out victorious. Greg Vanney's made those changes. He's made those tweaks, and he definitely deserves his flowers and props for that.
Yeah, like I said, there was a lot of things said about him unfairly, and I always thought he was a pretty great coach, and I appreciate how willing he is to speak to the media in the good and bad moments as well. But yeah, you're being able to see what he's always wanted to come together with his team, and he's still, I think, pretty cautious in the way that he talks about it. Like he said yesterday, this is probably the proudest moment he's had since he got to the Galaxy, but he's also aware that there's still so much more to accomplish, and a club that has those high aspirations definitely does not want to fall short of winning hardware, of making these runs and actually being competitive year after year. So salute to Greg Vanney, who has been great. We mentioned the Galaxy being unbeaten in Carson. There's 5 games left on this regular season schedule for the Galaxy. 3 of those are at home, and they are all in a row. So that's great. This weekend coming up, they're in Portland. Then they have a home game against the Vancouver Whitecaps. They have I'm sorry, I lied. 2 of them. Then they're going to Colorado. Then they're back against Austin FC at Dignity Health Sports Park. And then they close in Houston on decision day. Now, it's tricky because those are all teams basically in a direct mix for playoff spots in the West, which is as crowded as ever now with so many teams getting in, and the points that separate them are not too many. So there's still a lot of work to be done for the Galaxy. They have to close this out in the right way. What do you want to see from them in this last stretch run going into the playoffs? The playoff spot is clinched. They officially did that with beating LAFC in El Tráfico. Now they have to try to get that number 1 spot, or keep the number 1 spot rather. What do you want to see from the Galaxy in those last few games before the playoffs start?
Stay focused and stay composed. Look, last year, right, St. Louis City, nobody expected them to be first place in the Western Conference. I think majority of the people in MLS media didn't expect the LA Galaxy to be first place in the Western Conference. Don't be like St. Louis City SC, where they kind of took the pedal off the gas, right? They kind of were declining at the wrong moment. It felt like, the moment was too big for them in their first expansion year. If you're the LA Galaxy, if you're Greg Vanney, you kind of got to keep that mentality going, that we got to keep improving. We got to keep showing that growth, showing that solidity in the back line. If they're able to do that, continue to kind of be a consistent juggernaut and, not, fall off, not decline in the performances, I think they'll have a good shot in the playoffs. That's my thing. As long as you're able to keep that mentality, be able to kind of be accountable for one another, both as, the players and the coaching staff and everybody within the organization. You want to head into playoffs hot. You want to head in with a good amount of momentum. You don't want to head in there where you've had a couple of, bad back-to-back performances where, there's some questions about some players. You want to be able to go in there and have people saying, hey, we're a favorite for MLS Cup, and let's show it. Let's, prove the doubters wrong. I mean, I'm pretty sure they have the predictions from everybody at the MLSsoccer.com staff kind of predicting them to be either 13th, 12th, 10th, 9th. I think the highest one, I forgot who it was maybe 5th or 6th. But nobody expected the LA Galaxy to be first place in the Western Conference. I doubt anybody's really putting a bunch of money in the LA Galaxy to win MLS Cup, considering, they're a little squeaky in the back. They can be an emotional team. And obviously when you have players like in the other conferences like Messi and, and with Miami and Cucho and Columbus, there's not a lot of people, I think, that are putting the LA Galaxy as the favorite for MLS Cup, but that's what motivates them. That's what's going to keep them going. And as long as they're able to keep that composure and be accountable for the position they're in, then they'll be good in the playoff time.
Yeah, it's all valid points. And listen, man, I feel like at this point, you would kind of be a fool not to be giving the Galaxy the respect that they deserve. They're in first place for a reason. They've been up there for a decent amount of time now. And the West is a fight, man. And the thing about the West is there are stadiums in the West that you do not want to go to in certain places. Like you don't want to go to Seattle in the playoffs. Going to Portland in the playoffs is difficult. And the Galaxy are proving now that going to Carson is not going to be an easy feat for anybody. The energy in the stadium was incredible. It's probably the loudest I've heard it in a long, long time. Shout out to the LA Riot Squad with the Kendrick Lamar Euphoria banners. They were amazing. I had a really good laugh with those. So yeah, it's funny because the beginning of the season was are the Galaxy back? And they were asking that after like 1 or 2 games, which it was warranted because they had a pretty good start to the season. But the answer to that is firmly yes. And we just now have to see what they do in these last few games. I hate using the phrase, but these next 5 games are going to tell us a lot of what we need to know about the team and whether or not they are up for that challenge. We know how the playoffs are. They're always a toss up, but there's good competition there, and the Galaxy are amongst the best. And I think with Joseph Payne still back in that team, they're as good as an attack as you have in MLS, probably aside from, like you mentioned, what's happening in Miami and probably Columbus. I think they could hold their own with anybody in the West, as they showed against LAFC. And the other thing is that they do end up playing LAFC in the playoffs, which we all want to see. There's so much emotion behind that. And the reason why I mentioned Steve Cherundolo always trying to diminish that is because he did that yesterday again and said, oh, this game didn't feel like as much of a derby as it usually does. And it's like, that's probably more indictment on you and what your team is doing and the mentality that you guys are coming into this game with, because it should feel like Greg Vanney set that bar before, like I mentioned about saying we need to win this. And the atmosphere was there in the stadium. You guys should be feeling more so than anything. Like, we're on the road. We need to make sure we play up to the level of that. So there's always that emotional and that mental aspect that comes in between those two teams. So we'll hope to the soccer gods that we get it again. Hopefully here it would be in Carson most likely this time, and it would be fun, because the times that we have had it has always been a blast, and I'm ready for another one. I know they play each other too many times, but
way too many times.
We're never not going to want to see it in the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely find a way to motivate Riqui Puig online, so he'll be locked in for those games. I can confirm that.
You heard it there, Galaxy fans. Alex, my man, I appreciate you for coming on. Thanks as always for sharing your knowledge. Keep up the great work. Keep up all the coverage. If you want to be tapped in with the Galaxy, Alex, let them know where they could follow you, where they could find your work, man.
Yeah, thanks, Andy, for your time. Really appreciated getting on the podcast. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter, X at ALXRuiz15. You can also find my written work at thegalactictribune.org.
Yes, sir. Tap in with the boy, Alex. This is Kicking the Real Podcast. We'll be back soon. Until then, peace.